friends, welcome to Cinematire. Today we're going to discuss Shadow and Bone, the new Netflix adaptation. It's going to be a little short one where I just give you my first thoughts. Should we get into it? Let's do it. This is your future. How will you dress it? So, first thoughts, I am not gonna lie, we binged this in one day, and my husband had fully planned on doing gardening. That didn't happen. When a show grabs you, it grabs you. Around the time this book series came out, I was reading a lot of YA, but a lot of YA was also coming out, and I missed this one. I know a lot of my friends and fans really like this series. I decided to go in blind. I really like to read the source material before going into a YA series, but I thought I would just see what happened. And I really thought they introduced the series with a lot of care to the audience. Seeing a lot of responses from fans online about how it really looked the way they imagined it in their heads was pretty cool. From the first moment, you can really tell how big the world is, and they don't try to overwhelm you. There are a couple of those little YA things that happen where like the first episode is very high exposition, but it also really chills out and kind of lets you figure it out on your own. And of course, there are a couple of those instances where you're like, yes, I get it, I'll figure it out. You don't have to tell me in plain language, but it doesn't take you out of the story. For those of you who haven't read it or seen the show, mild spoilers. I'm not gonna do an in-depth dive like I usually do. I really wanted to do my usual amount of research, but I thought this would be an interesting change. That being said, I did look up a couple of things because that's just the person I am. And so there are a few things where I was like, and then I read online this, but I really tried to stop myself. I will let you know explicitly when I looked something up. This world has to me what looks like benders from Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. The way they do magic, or what they call small sciences, the way they move, the way they use their hands is very much like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. I wonder why then the actual live action adaptation of Avatar couldn't get that right.
It's time for you to stop doing this!
The people with powers, or small sciences, are called Grisha, and they wear something called a Kefta. The Kefta is a coat that, depending on the color, signifies the order that the Grisha is a part of. Each group has not just a distinct color, they also have special embroidery and special colors to show what discipline they're in. These coats were gorgeous. They reminded me of Tsarist Russia. The embroidery was breathtaking. And you could tell that so much care went into making and fitting these coats. One thing I did see online was 250 kefta were made for everybody, every Grisha, even if they didn't have a speaking role. So that's all those extras. I think there's only like less than 10 that have speaking roles of any import. And that's 240 other coats that were made and perfectly fit on those extras. That's ridiculous. The Grishaverse, the story that this takes place in, has a whole bunch of countries and cities that are inspired by different countries and cities throughout time in our world. And the first people we're introduced to, like I said, look a lot like Tsarist Russia. And a lot of the stuff that I saw, including the people in the court and the people like the royalty and the different army people, looked a lot like what I saw at the Minnesota Russian Art Museum when they had a Romanov exhibit. Just being able to see those things up close and then seeing it also translated into this world where it's otherworldly and kind of magical, fantastical, was a cool touch. And I like being able to see something that just doesn't look like period costumes. Okay, look, I know I look cute as heck, but I need to take this off because it's very warm. That's more like it. Our super special chosen girl is Alina Starkov. She's an orphan who's mixed race, and one of her parents is from the enemy nation. I thought it was a really cool touch to actually add racism. I feel like every time racism or bigotry is brought up in any sort of fantasy series, it's like, is that person half elf? Is that person raised by dwarves or something? And it's just this otherworldly concept of what racism is. But when you're like, oh, that person comes from a country I don't like, they look different than us, I'm going to be racist against them and then bring it up. I think it was a bold choice. There's even an instance where she's getting her makeup done and some snotty housemaid decides to say,
I'd start by making her eyes less shoot, Miss Seffin.
But Alina and Jenya, who is helping her, is like, you need to leave. And she's like, please don't change my eyes. So the fact that she has to deal with that racism, but also is comfortable enough in her own skin is just good job. Alina's not a fighter. She's a cartographer. Her childhood best friend in the orphanage, Mal, he's in the First Army with her. He's a fighter. She's not. And the thing that I like about the two of them is they're always there for each other and they'll fight for each other. He'll fight physically, she'll fight with her wits, and they both kind of fight with their wits, but they're always there for each other, and it's very sweet. One of the things I noticed was the orphans all wear these tunics. They're kind of like a long, shifty tunic thing, belted with their buttons off kilter. They're on the side instead of down the front, like things in our world. And at first I was like, that's a really interesting choice. It's just a design choice. And I noticed it later too, and I'll get to that. But I thought that was cool, and I made a note of it. We're introduced to the First Army, and the First Army wear Cossack style hats, those Russian, like when you think of Russians, it's that fur hat. And not all of them wear it, but if they're wearing a hat, it's that style. Female soldiers have the option to wear what looks like long culottes, like a midi length culotte, or regular trousers like the men. The higher ups have embroidery down the front of their jackets, and the really high ranks have cords on their shoulders, kind of like military here. The embroidery on the front looks reminiscent of stuff we've seen in the past, but not necessarily just we lifted this from thing. It's very distinct. The lower ranks are far more plain, and all of them appear to be wearing wool and leather. So back to what I was saying about the off-center buttons. The uniforms are olive green. The shirts have the off-center buttons. And I like that these shirts were like the orphan tunics, and I thought, oh, that must mean that this world evolved in such a way where maybe the majority of people are, right-handed or left-handed. I can't remember which side it was on. So they think it makes more sense to put your dominant hand farther away, since that's what your hand would naturally do. Because in our world, shirts are usually buttoned up the front or tied up the front, looking back into the past. And even though now we don't have dressing servants, women's shirts and men's shirts button overlap different because of what happened in the past of like women would have servants dressing them and men were more likely to be in the military, so they'd have to dress themselves and other reasons like that. And the overjacket is a bit oversized and made of leather. The Second Army is made entirely of Grisha, and they all have matching cloaks to go with their Kefta. The cloaks have fur, everything matches perfectly, just so pretty. One of the things I thought was really cool about the embroidery was, the embroidery is all different colors, but you can tell which ones are sort of doing the same kind of magic. This is one of the things that I looked up. The 3 orders of the Grisha are Corporalki, I'm going to say all these wrong, Etherealki, and Materialki. And from what I can see, the Corporalki deal with bodies. So it's like people who can do blood magic, and then healers can fix the body, and then the rare ones are tailors, and they're the ones who I think that they're magical plastic surgeons. The Etherealki are benders, like in Avatar, the Squallers, the Inferni, and the Tide Makers, and they do fire, wind, and water. Then the Materialki are like actual science. They're the ones that make stuff. So I think it's like alchemists and machinists. And they've got Duras and alchemy. Yes, so alchemists and ones who can like make stuff. So depending on what those little things are, they've got different colored embroidery on them. And I thought that was really cool because it's like ranked medals or certain fringe like you would have in a normal military. Very, very cool idea. So our main love interest slash, is he the antagonist? Of course he is. He's wearing all black. Is the Darkling. And he is such a butthole. Like, he's exactly who he presents himself to be. And you get really frustrated because Alina's just like, ooh, me, who? And like, he's obviously manipulating her. But what if you were raised in an orphanage and the only people you'd ever been around were other orphans? I feel like you'd probably be pretty naive once you get into the military. So I give her a pass. It's not like YA girl falls in love pass. It's I'm naive because I was raised in an orphanage and they didn't teach us how to be around people. So anyway, the Darkling, his costume is so freaking beautiful. Like, it's the same Kefta, the same cloak, and it has this black on black embroidery, black sable fur, and it looks so decadent and beautiful and classy. And so even though like you just want to punch the guy, you also kind of want to just pet his outfit because everything looks like it has beautiful, lovely textures on it. It's amazing. The only person who wears black is the Darkling, except for when Alina is introduced at the fete. She's wearing all black, but because she's our super special chosen girl and we learn about what her power is, she has gold embroidery. That's going to be the one that I don't spoil. Another thing I really liked about the Darkling, he had these silver closures that I don't know if it was like the sun or the moon, but it was a circle on the inside. And unlike a lot of things where it's like kind of far apart, they were actually really close together and there were a ton of them. It was a very striking look that I hadn't really seen in anything before. And I was really happy that it wasn't just, let's make it look steampunk or let's make it look, name a thing in history. It was a very cool touch and I really appreciate interesting and custom hardware. Our last Grisha is Jenya, and she wears all white, which from context clues leads me to believe it's because she belongs to the queen and not to the army. I'm not sure if that's the case or if it's because she's a special kind of Grisha, but her white outfit looks really cool. Like I said, I'm relatively sure it's because she isn't part of the army because later she ends up getting a colored one.
I never did like this color red. Clashes with my hair.
Which I thought was very funny. My one gripe about Jenya, despite the fact that the actress is beautiful and her costume is amazing, is I can't tell if they dyed her hair and it just looks really bad. Like, you know how sometimes when someone dyes their hair red and it looks like they were going for a natural shade, but it looks so unnatural on them that you know that they dyed it? Or it's just a really good wig, and because it's so voluminous, it looks like it must not be, I can't tell if they dyed her hair or put her in a wig, and it's very distracting. I wish they had gone with either a different shade of red or maybe a different wig. She looks good with red hair, but I would have done something different. And her eyebrows are like a cool brown, so if they'd gone with like a warm brown, I think it would have been better. And the fact that her eyebrows are cool brown distracts from the red hair and makes it look fake. I know that I get hung up on eyebrows and I need to calm down, but you won't stop me. As I said earlier, the court in this kingdom is inspired by, you can tell, obviously, by Tsarist Russia. I like what the king and queen are wearing. I think it's beautiful, but I think that the extras all just kind of look like they went somewhere and got period costumes. There were a few during like the fete where they're wearing interesting colored garments that I wouldn't necessarily see maybe in historical outfits. Like there was one that was kind of an all over sorbet orange and it was really cool. It looked like something from maybe 200 years ago, but in a color that I probably wouldn't have seen until maybe 120 years ago, just with, you know, dyes, the way they work and what has been come up with. But I feel like they could have pushed the extras in the court just slightly further so we could kind of get an idea of why some things are advanced and different, but these rich people are still wearing the same old thing they would wear on our Earth. Now we're going to move on to Ketterdam, and this is a city that looks like it's a mix between the 1900s and the 1930s. The styles are kind of a mishmash of fabrics and time periods, but it really works, and I like that it seems more modern than the other stuff we've seen. I'm going to talk about the crows, and I only know about them because a lot of the booktubers I really like talk about that duology, the Six of Crows, and I did look it up a little bit because I kind of fell in love with Jesper. I think he's fantastic, and he's probably my favorite character.
That's why I brought you. Make sure they don't see me.
Handsome decoy is also not a Jesper talent.
If you want to see some of the booktubers that I'm talking about, I'm going to put some links in the description, but I really like the episode breakdowns that Reading with Cindy is doing. It's absolutely adorable because you can tell how much she loves those books. The leader of the group is Kaz. There's nothing actually really exceptional about his look. You can tell he's the leader because of how he acts, not because of anything he wears. He always has a scowl on his face. I think his best costume piece besides his cane is his face. But he pretty much only wears head to toe black and some gray. His cane has a crow's head on top of it. It's very cool. I also like that when he wears an overcoat, the collar's always popped, which I think is kind of imposing. And not collar pop in like an 80s do-bag way, but like, you know, pop like I'm a fancy gentleman about town. Next is Inej, and she is so beautiful. Just the actress is gorgeous. What she's wearing is really cool because even though it's very streamlined, she's wearing layers and layers and layers, and the top layer is like a cape thing, and she wears a scarf around her head, then she takes that off and she's got kind of, I can't tell if it's like a sweater or a wrap shirt, but it's asymmetrical with interesting metal closures on it. And then underneath that is what looks like a blouse and just a waistcoat, almost like a very fancy bank manager, kind of like this character in Castlevania right now. I walked through while my husband was watching it, and it just looks like a fancy battle bank manager. But all of it is blue, like all the same shade of blue except for the light colored blouse, and it's gorgeous. And I did see in a tweet that the actress really loved that the costume department made sure that she had enough room for all of her knives actually in it. It wasn't that she was just grabbing them from wherever. There was a spot for every single one of her knives, and I think she had like 14 knives. That's really cool. She and Kaz wear costumes. I mean, all of them wear costumes, but the two of them, they're just like, yep, got a job to do, got to put on a costume. There's one, and I'll get to it later, but yeah, they just kind of wear costumes. But then there's Jesper.
Never make decisions out of fear, Jesper. Only out of spite.
Well, greed always worked for me.
Aesthetically, he looks like Bonfire Annie from the Nevers and Ambrose from Sabrina had a beautiful gay gunslinger baby, and he's perfect. Plus, he's like the only one who gets a real kind of like grown-up scene, a little tumble in the hay, if you will. One of the things I really appreciate about him, especially because he is a man of color, I really hate when black men don't really get good hair design in like a period movie or fantasy. They're like, okay, well, he's got big hair, I'll just let it be big. It's like, well, no, like men wouldn't have worn their hair like that. If you're going gung-ho into this era, then at least do some hair design. And I liked his hard part. I like that it looks like it was partially relaxed. I think that every scene he's in, he looks like he took the time to do his hair. He's a chameleon in every scene. I'm gonna just do a quick drop of all of his best looks right now. Of extras. They all kind of look, like I said, from the 1900s to the 1930s, but there are two that have speaking roles, and one is Helene, who runs the menagerie. Nej is indentured to this place. I think the woman who plays Helene is beautiful. I think that the colors they chose for her were nice, but the dress just looks like cosplay to me. You've seen this woman at every steampunk convention you've ever been to. I just feel like they could have done more with her, and they didn't. But we have Poppy. Poppy is a performer, and they are just glamorous. Kaz goes and gets some intel from Poppy, and you just see gold and glitter, and gotta inject a little bit of sparkle into that dark world, don't you? The last group I'm going to talk about are the Fjordans, and they're like the Scandinavian analog for this world. I'm not really going to go too heavily into it. It's just dudes in fur and leather. Imagine a Scandinavian. It's that. There is a scene where one of the Grisha brings in some gloves that he specially made to amplify Alina's power, and just this scene was maybe 2 minutes long. It was very, very short. And the fact that he created this piece of clothing for her to do a thing, and then she takes the thing off and realizes she can do it herself and doesn't need the piece of clothing, and then we never see them again. That is very thoughtful costuming. I don't know if that was in the book, but the idea that you would have a garment created specifically to motivate the character to try better, and then have that piece of clothing be beautiful when it's on screen, that's the kind of thoughtful costume design that I live for. And it was just a pair of gloves. There's a scene in episode 5 where they see a play about the super special MacGuffin. And it reminds me so much of the Ember Island players in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And the play scene, it's like a reenactment play in The Magicians. It's very short, it's very funny, but the costumes absolutely look like they're part of a traveling play and not just we grabbed a bunch of stuff that was laying around the costume department to throw on these people. The hair pieces that Alina wears are very cool. Like, I don't think I've ever really seen any headpieces like this before. And I mean, honestly, any of the jeweled headpieces in the show are very cool, but these, a lot of them kind of wrap around the back of her head, hang from the back of her hair. Her hair will be up, but it's like a plate of metal with cool stuff on it. Very, very classy, cool touch. Not my favorite things. Nej is beautiful in her silks outfit, but it looks so modern. It looks like a ribbon dancing outfit for high school gymnastics. It's rainbow, and you can tell that they sewed each individual stripe instead of just like dyeing it that way or printing it that way, but it still looks very modern and very from here. A lot of the boots, especially the military boots, again, looked a little too modern. A lot of them had speed laces, and while I understand that was probably faster for the people who are playing the character, it again didn't look like it was of the era. They were too clean in most instances, even if they were doing something in that scene. You gotta age your boots. Alina wears this beautiful black dress, and while the black obviously represents him, the colors on the collar of the design are like an olive green. If you were going to like have it represent the thing that she is, why wouldn't you have it be gold? In the next scene, when she switches to her color swapped outfit, again, we got the black embroidery, fine, whatever. But the dress itself, when we see it head on, it's like pea green. And I thought, why isn't it gold? And then they turn around to the back of her and it's gold. And I was like, maybe I missaw that. So I rewound it and I was like, no, it's green. So then I let it play and it was gold on the back. And I was like, well, maybe it's a Dupioni, and the cross thread is green. And I kept watching it back and forth because they kept doing it back and forth of the front and the back. And it was always green on the front and it was always gold on the back. And I was like, well, maybe they just did the grain on one side and then in the back they did the cross grain. And I was like, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. Wait, what's that? Enhance. Enhance. Oh, I bet they didn't clean up the color in the special effects. Because if you see right there, it's gold, but the rest is green. Pay attention to your special effects. I felt like I was going insane, and I felt like the show was gaslighting me, so all in all, I loved the costumes, and of course, there's a handful of things I would have changed, things I would have tweaked, but that didn't take me fully out of the world. And I think between the costumes and the music, shout out to Joseph, I couldn't stop watching it, which I think is a really good sign. And yeah, the story is really, really cool, but I want to know what's happening in the world, and I want to keep tuning in to find out what happens to all these characters and what they're going to do next and what they explore. So can't wait for season 2. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Cinematire. Now to ask you, if you were going to build a world and you had to set your countries apart, what would you do to make them look different? If you were Grisha, what would be your power? If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Feel free to comment, get that discussion going. And if you want to know when new videos are coming out, please subscribe. If you want to see behind the scenes stuff, please subscribe to my Patreon. And seriously, the biggest thank you to all of my patrons. I am so grateful to all of you, especially during the last year. And I'm so happy I can share behind the scenes stuff with you. And I really want to share more of it as I go on a couple of other ventures. And obviously still this. They're getting that stuff first. You can get it too. So I adore you, my patrons. I look forward to meeting you, my future patrons, and until next time, have a good one. Butt in with red string orphan army conspiracy. Here, put that here.